Ryan, what is going on, brother bear?
Ah, man, it's midweek. We're excited for this. My favorite day of the week. We get to talk data and basically tell a story with data, Dan. But I'm excited. We're here 3 days in a row, getting back into the groove, as we say. How you been, man?
How you finding the groove? Getting back into it?
I missed it.
Did you realize how much you missed it?
Yeah, I did. I definitely did realize I missed it. I think, and you and I actually talked off air, and it's really important for everybody to kind of look at that as well. Like for me, it's just getting back into a routine, and maybe on Friday, maybe I'll share where I was on this mysterious vacation for a month. But for me, it was just getting back into a routine and understanding that I got to hit my marks, getting back into the routine of going to the gym again, doing all my dog walks, doing everything, and doing the show, and actually having the conversation with customers. So I think it's what we're taking with great value and engaging with our amazing audience once again. It's awesome, and I'm really happy to be here again.
Well, we're glad you're back, brother, because I know we have two gentlemen here today that will vouch that Fridays are absolutely a blast. They just love the questions I asked, and it was I was a super host. But today, let's talk about today. Today we've got U.S. exports, we've got Pacific Northwest produce, and we've got the housing market. Three massive pieces of the puzzle for the next phase of logistics throughout the summer, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm seeing housing and building going skyrocketing, and some of the people that we have.
I wish I could turn my camera around, man. I would actually love to show you guys. Like I've been starting doing a time lapse. So behind me is obviously our backyard and the fence, and then like right in front of us, they're actually building new townhomes. And just seeing this progression, man. Like honestly, like digging the wells, bringing in all the piping, bringing everything. Right now, there's actually a dump truck right now outside my house right now, just moving stuff through. Like, and this has been a span of maybe like 3 weeks, Dan. So housing just it's crazy.
Yeah, there's a 120 acres at the top of town here, and they clear cut it middle of last summer, and there was like zero movement. And then the last couple of weeks, you're starting to see foundations dug. You're starting to see where all the sidewalks are going because they're putting in all the sewers and they're doing everything, and they're connecting it into the new filtration plant being built. And it's like, holy crap, we are getting 780 homes being put in this area, and it's amazing what happens when they start to move, and they move fast, right? But nonetheless, brother, ready to get it going?
Let's get it going, my man.
Let's bring him in, Mr. Dickinson. Jeff, how are you, buddy? Diener, how are you, pal?
Thank you. Great, good to be with you guys.
So, Dean,
another round.
Yeah, another round, baby, another round. Yes, sir. Share with us, my man, what's happening in the wonderful world of data.
A lot happening in the freight market. A couple of trends that are worth watching. I think the story around high interest rates has really slowed down a lot of activity in the new home market. And when I say that, it's an unusual circumstance because a lot of us with low interest rates are reluctant to sell existing homes. So we're staying put. So there's less inventory on the market. What that's doing is driving the market up for new homes. So from a freight perspective, that is good news. And the data kind of plays out. This morning, the US Census Bureau released the new data for the month of June for single family and multifamily housing starts and permits. I look at permits because they're a leading indicator of homes that are going to be built in the future. And I'm looking at the year-to-date numbers because I think that tells a better story than the year-over-year numbers because we're comparing it to a period in time that was crazy 12 months ago. Year-over-year permits are up 23%, which is significant. They were up slightly last month. So there's positive activity there in terms of builders building new homes in the coming months. Number of permits, so number of single-family homes started. Remember, a start can be literally digging a hole with a backhoe. That constitutes a start. They were down about 7% in the month of June, but they're up 14% over the course of this year, which is a more important number. They're down 7% because they were up double that last month. So there's a surge, an unusual surge in activity in May. It's come back down more to where it would be in terms of a natural progression of increasing, 14% year to date. So good news on the single family home front. That is good news for carriers. There is a little bit of a floor sitting under flatbed rates right now. They've been very flat for the best part of the year, notwithstanding a few ups and downs. But I think as our good friend Jason Miller has said on numerous occasions, that the fortunes of the freight market will hinge largely on the fortunes of the building industry, especially the residential home construction industry, not just flatbeds, but dry vans that bring all the finished goods in once a home is built. So I think
not only that, you think about what goes into building a home, right? Like the amount of different products and materials. I mean, it's crazy. And then you start building thousands and tens of thousands of homes. That's a lot of freight.
And remember, I look at single family homes, and again, this is back of the envelope type math, but I equate a single family home translates to about 5 flatbed loads, give or take a half load here or there. So flatbeds tend to be the most, single family homes are the most freight intensive when you look at what goes into building them, and the most number of unique loads. When we look at the totality of single family homes, we're about 70,000 homes more in June this year than June in 2019. So the data point that just keeps jumping out at me is how similar this market is to 2019. But if you listen to Adam Wingfield on our show yesterday, on our IQ show, when I went through my market update and I was talking about all of the different rates, he said, as I listen to you, I just think all of that's normal. Normal as in this is what rates are normally like, in 2019, early 2020, very, very normal. He said some of the numbers that we were talking about last year really overinflated a lot of people's expectations. So that's the data out this morning on the single family home front. Nationally, spot market rates are kind of, I won't say lacking direction, although that's probably a pretty good description. They dropped back a little bit last week, which is not unsurprising. Rates normally retreat after July 4. But they've retreated back to about a penny per mile, just under the 3-month average. So again, sitting around where they've been for 3 months, that's kind of where it looks like the floor is sitting right now. Our short-term 35-day forecasts do have a little bit more down movement. So that's a possibility somewhere in that 5 to 8 cents a mile range. But of course, some of the things that are rumbling around in the LTL market could change that. Imports are up, as we spoke about last week, which is good news. The other data point that popped out today, worth talking about, is the ATA truckload carrier index. It's the ATA for-hire tonnage index, to be precise, was released yesterday evening. It heavily weights the contract freight market as opposed to DAT's spot market. Contract market, the tonnage index was up 2.1% in June. It was up 2.1% in May. So that's 2 months of sequential increases, trending now at about just under 1% lower than this time last year, which is a very good data point. But what Bob Casello is saying is that here's a quote: "There's a multitude of factors causing the freight recession: stagnant consumer demand, lower home construction, falling factory output, and shippers consolidating freight into fewer shipments compared with the frenzy during the goods buying spree at the height of the pandemic." So the year-over-year declines are getting better. They're getting closer to turning year-over-year positive. The general consensus there from Bob Costello, the chief economist at the ATA, is that we are nearing the bottom, or if not past where the bottom of the freight market could be. A number of data points kind of support that. Our spot rates would sort of confirm that also. From a regional perspective, if we dive down into some of the regions, one region worth looking at right now, I think from a capacity perspective, things will change fairly significantly. The Pacific Northwest produce market is starting to heat up. From about now until November, capacity tightens in the Pacific Northwest markets. We get pretty deep into fall produce season. On the back end of the season, we'll start off with cherries very shortly. That season is starting a bit earlier. Rates are already increasing out of the Pacific Northwest. So if you're looking to buy capacity, especially refrigerated capacity in the Pacific Northwest, you're going to find it more expensive. The other thing to watch is that the British Columbia strike by the port workers up there is back on. After lasting 13 days and agreeing to a tentative agreement, the strike is now over. Sorry, the strike is now, or the agreement is over, and they're back on strike, which is an important thing to watch, because they say for every day it's about a week in terms of the delay. Some of that volume, when you look at how vessels run into Prince Rupert and Vancouver, British Columbia, they make Seattle is the call that they make prior to that. So it won't be surprising to see a lot more import volume drop off in the Seattle market to avoid the Pacific Northwest, which could mean that flows over into the truckload market, and we start to see even tighter capacity in the Pacific Northwest not just because it's produce season leading into, of course, Christmas tree season, but because we're seeing a higher number of imports rediverted or diverted into the Seattle market. So that's one to watch. I think that's going to be a story that I thought it was over, but I think that one there has the potential to disrupt supply chains further inland. Why should we care? A lot of the volume that comes into British Columbia on the import side ends up in Memphis, Kansas City, and Chicago. So even though it's Canada, a lot of that volume does cross the border on trains coming back into our Midwest freight markets. So that's kind of where we're at, Dan. Spot markets, volumes are very low. We're still tracking from a volume perspective, tracking almost identically to where we were in 2019. It's the nearest year I can find. Some of our load truck ratios are some of the lowest we've ever seen, which kind of underlies, I think, how soft the current freight market is. We are losing, when we look at the number of carriers leaving the market, again, the trend is much the same. We are losing carriers at a decreasing rate. We were losing carriers at about twice the rate they've been coming into the industry. It was about a 2-to-1 churn since October. That has slowed right down, and we're on track for a pretty good result for the month of July. We expect we'll see fewer carriers leaving the industry as each month goes by. And I'm anticipating, based on the current trajectory, that we'll get to, I'll call it break even. And by that, I mean the same number of carriers coming in that are leaving. I think we'll get there in about August, which again kind of coincides with when we think peak shipping season might start to occur and capacity tightens. If that all plays out, that means that the market will have rebalanced itself such that the number of loads is getting closer to the number of available trucks to haul them.
So can we play in the sandbox on some of these? New homes, permits issued equals 385,000 flatbed trucks. Huge amount of volume for any salespeople watching and listening. If you have any prospects or customers in the market that would use stuff for homes, now is the time to start calling them and talking to them about the housing market. Maybe go Google some of the information Dean just gave you. Get in on the know. Share with them the know and how you know about the housing market and what's happening, because they might even be behind the 8 ball. Give them a little bit of ammo. Give them a few tidbits of information to get yourself in the mix. I look at that and I say, awesome. The Pacific Northwest, you know what? If we start routing freight into Seattle instead of Vancouver, it's going to do a couple of things, I see, Dean. Obviously, one, clog that port huge. Two, it's a lot of BC carriers are going to be driving empty to Seattle to pick up containers for their customers.
Right.
Cross-dock facilities in that area. Like, you think about the mass of freight coming in and what, as a sales rep, your job is to help your customers hit their KPIs, hit their mandates, hit their goals.
Right.
You got to stay ahead of that.
Exports are going to take a hammering too, because those containers, the 4 on-dock trains that run off Prince Rupert every day going to Chicago, they won't be taking empties back to Seattle and Prince Rupert. So you're going to have a backlog of containers inland. I think that's where the biggest disruption is going to occur, is in the intermodal sector, especially inland. I think lots of supply chain disruptions to occur. On the good side, though, you're talking about 8% of our national volume comes into Seattle. Now, that'll increase. So it's not like it's 46% in Long Beach and Port of Los Angeles, right, where it really becomes crippling. But I think it will have an impact on the freight market.
For sure. I mean, just even Ontario, Quebec, Prince Rupert and BC market feeds us. The majority of the freight that comes in, Asia imports and all that, feeds us. I mean, it's crazy.
ITS, one of our big customers, DAT out of Reno, Nevada, they put out a report that's freely available because I think it's called the ITS Ramp Index. ITS Logistics is the company. They have a ramp index where they measure all the delays. I'm going to be out there in Reno with them in a couple of weeks, digging into a lot more of their data sets, because I think they've actually got a very good intermodal data set to share with us on a more consistent basis. They've been telling their customers to not only change their routing of imports, but to change their mode, which is pretty much what Jeff, I think, has been doing for quite a while, with especially with some of your yellow clients and other clients, because you've seen this coming a lot further than most, is getting ahead of the game and making sure you don't have your freight stranded. But I thought it was a pretty quick move to be telling people, midway through the strike in British Columbia, change your modes, change your point of destination immediately, and get that stuff moving on a truck, because you don't want it stranded in a container somewhere in a backlog, choked up container yard, which is exactly what we had 18 months ago.
It's, I mean, I'd love your guys' opinion on it, but do you think that because it actually got to the strike point, then they got, somebody gave in, strike ended. They want more. Somebody's going to give in for the strike to end. Do you see this happening more and more with different unions across North America? Because to me, it kind of set a precedent, right? And Dean, you and I were talking about this 2 weeks ago, I think, where it's like, originally I had said, even on this show, it's never going to happen. They're not going to go on strike. The government's going to step in. Right. Somebody's going to step in, because they always do. And we always avert this in the logistics world, but everybody gets panicked and starts moving freight and starts doing stuff. But now it's actually happened. And do you guys see it happening more and more? What's your guys' thoughts?
Well, I'll quickly answer it, because I was fascinated by the, I think salvo is the right word, the salvo fired across the White House's bow by the Teamsters boss the other day. And of course, he was taking direct aim at Mayor Marty Walsh, who was our mayor in Boston. And he was, if you recall, he's a pretty good guy. This guy, he was very well respected here in labor circles in Boston. He went to work for the Biden administration in the, I'm going to say Department of Labor. I probably got that wrong. He's not there anymore. But clearly what they were saying was, we don't want you involved. We don't want the White House involved like you did with the rail industry. So there's been a lot of posturing, Dan, a lot of things going back and forward that are fairly surprising. I don't know that this is unusual, but I think it's a little bit unusual. We're seeing so much of it in the same period, the same space of time over the summer. We've got a number of LTL companies. We've got 2 ports. The ILWU has, I think they've still got to ratify the West Coast agreement, but the British Columbia one has failed today. And Greg Miller, great journalist over at Freightways, wrote today about it. There's a piece out now saying that the ILWU Canada, a unanimous vote from the membership, does not believe the recommendations by the, was it a federal mediator, has the ability to protect our jobs now and in the futures. Members were back on the picket line this morning. So yeah, these are interesting times. I don't know that I have an answer, Dan. I'm not a labour market expert. I'll defer to the other guys who probably have been in this market longer than I have.
Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing these news like all over the place. Like last night on the Toronto news that 100,000 what do you call them, landlord, like tenants of like a couple apartment buildings, they actually went on strike. Because of all the increases in rent that they've kind of seen over the last couple of months, couple of years. And I think when it kind of comes down to human...
Tenants went on strike?
Tenants went on strike, yeah, in downtown Toronto. I'll send you the article. And I just think people are fed up. You look around you look at, as much as you beat around a dead horse, but the conversation anytime I have with somebody is, hey, look at inflation. Look how expensive my grocery, my gas, everything has gone up, shrinkflation and everything like that. The cost of living. Right. Like I was working on a project and, I feel like, I don't know how it is around the world, but I know in Toronto, I feel like to survive is like, you got to have at least a full, both parents have to be working, like both spouses have to be working. Yep. They have to have a side hustle, like I know some people who are just working their Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and then they have a side hustle on weekends, so just that. I feel like people are just going to strike because they're fed up with it. Right. And I remember when Dean was talking about the last strike in the States, I forgot what it was, the railroad, but there was a situation where the workers actually had to be on call. Like they couldn't even plan their own like work-life balance, like they can get a call within like 2 hours for them to be back at the plant. And I think people are just putting their foot down saying, you know what? I don't want to do this, like I come first. I got work-life balance, and it's something that's so important because we talk about, there's no amount of money that can give you peace forever. But if it's a situation where like, hey, I'm not being valued at work, then I'm going to start looking everywhere. But then there's the flip side of that, guys, because you go on Indeed, you go on LinkedIn, those jobs things. A job can be posted like 30 minutes ago, and you'll already see like 300 applicants are there. So what is the story? What is the true story? Is it people don't want to work, or people do want to work, or it's just like they're tightening the wallet? So I do see this coming up more and more across the world, just in general. Like, people are, we talked about this quite a bit, like that whole quiet quitting and that loud quitting and whatever the Gen Zs are calling it these days, right? But I see this I think people are starting to become they're recognizing their own value. And if not, then they're going to go off and start their own thing. But it's like what we always kind of say, like we're going to need doctors. We're going to need these skilled people in the future, right? So who are going to be those people? Because everybody can't be an influencer. Everybody can't be a very successful business owner. We're going to need those core values.
I like that. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to set a precedence, and really all depends on the company in and of itself. But I think they're playing a very, very dangerous wild card. And I just say that because, I mean, let's just look at Yellow Freight real quick. 22,000 union workers that are willing to put their job on the line and lose it. I mean, just think about, they're willing to give up everything to lose their job. I mean, does that really make sense? I mean, I'm just really baffled at that. And then most recently, as of the 17th, Yellow punted that $50 million payout. I mean, it's a huge, dangerous wild card. I don't think they're going to go through this at all. I don't think they are going to. I mean, listen, in 2008, at the end of 2008, almost 20 years ago, they were $1.36 billion in debt. Over the years, they reorganized, did all a bunch of changes, and they sold off 41.7% of their terminals, went from 600 terminals down to 350. Today, they are in debt for over $1.5 billion. So obviously they're restructuring, reorganization. It didn't work. They have a bad business plan. Who wants to invest in something like that? I think it's over, because everybody knows that, whatever they did to sell off, to pay down debt, it didn't work. Something's really wrong. And people are out there, shippers are taking a huge risk in using them as a carrier, because I've gone through some serious closures. And when they go bankrupt, they don't give you any, advance notice. They close their doors overnight, and your freight is stranded and stranded.
Well, who do you call to get your freight out of the trailer that's sitting somewhere? Like it
takes months, Dean. It takes months. I'm telling you. And the only reason why shippers are using them is because, and I laugh out loud, because of their cheap rates.
Cheap rate.
You think that had something to do with them being in debt?
Being in debt, and especially coming off of the last 3 years being some of the most profitable years carriers have ever seen.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's that in the equation as well. So how much of it'd be interesting to see what they were in. And I mean, I guess it's all irrelevant. How much were they in debt in 2019 compared to now? And how much of that money that they made, how much went out to investors? How much went out to CEO? Like how, there's that part of the equation.
Listen, in this bear market right now, they've already lost 16.3% of their tonnage. That's huge in this bear market. That's massive in this bear market, So what are they going to do to pay back these creditors, these lenders that are giving them the money? I mean, if I was a billionaire, there's no way I would invest in this company. No way. No way. I think it's a lost leader, man, for sure.
They're going to leave a lot of money on the street, for sure.
And when they do liquidate and sell it, it's going to be pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar. There's no, I mean, are you going to pay off that $1.5 billion? Seriously. Somebody's the loser on that end, big time.
Did they say, Jeff, did I read that that strike action was imminent with Yellow, like as in this week? Or was it the 24th?
They said that by the 24th. Is that?
4th.
Yeah, the 24th. Right. That's right around the corner.
That's next week.
That's right around the corner. Right? And I'm using St. Johnsbury as an example. All right. They sent out emails saying that no worries, we'll give you advance notice that when the last day of shipment is going, pickup is going to happen, all freight within the system will be delivered. It didn't happen. They just abruptly closed their gates,
Mm.
locked up everything, and freight was stranded. I wouldn't believe that at all. I mean, if you've got time sensitive stuff that you're shipping with Yellow right now, whoops, you did a big
Well, that's
mistake.
kind of like jumbo shrimp, though, isn't it, Jeff? Like time sensitive and yellow freight. Those two words don't go together ever. That's like
Oxymoron, my man. Oxymoron.
Yeah, that's like
I mean,
super jumbo
seriously.
shrimp.
Yeah.
That's a lobster.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You are taking a huge risk.
Yeah.
Huge risk right now.
Yeah. Well, I know that I've been speaking to quite a few people, and here's the one thing that I can say. I think people have stepped up their game from a couple of years ago. Is a lot of the people I spoke to, they've been getting calls from customers that they've been chasing, saying, "Hey, I want to use you as a contingent plan if something goes wrong with Yellow," and they've been saying, "Yep, no problem." Yep, like we're on it. We'll make it work. We'll figure it out, and just let us know. So they're kind of, I think shippers now are kind of taking that. So if any of you out there watching or listening that does LTL, ask your customers, like, and if you haven't already, you're behind the 8 ball. Ask your customers, like, LTL that I'm not getting, who is it with? What are the implications? Like, so I look at it from a Canadian perspective. There's LTL companies in Canada who are the Canadian extension of Yellow.
Yeah, Raymer.
Right? Well, Reimer, there's Speedy does a lot with them. Like, there's a bunch of different LTL companies. And it's like, they're going to be looking to the customers they've been delivering the freight for to go back to them and say, hey, just use us. Right? Yeah. So there's all this action in play where Yellow has partners that freight's given out to. And, it's going to be it's interesting. And I wouldn't even doubt it if people are already making the phone calls, even if they have contracts with Yellow.
Yeah. And you know something too, Dan? The other thing to take into consideration is when they close their doors at 350 terminals overnight, over £1 billion of freight's going to hit the market. Over £1 billion. Let that set in.
Now, here's my question. I love all your thoughts on this. Is that going to have a drastic impact in the spot market? Dean?
Well, it's 22,000 truckloads by my calculation at £45,000 a load. So here's the thing, Dan. I don't think so. Here's why. There's still a lot of capacity even in the contract freight market before it gets to the spot market. Remember in we were talking about the September strike of the railroad. We were hearing from shippers that we were already pulling our freight off the rails, and the contract freight market was already able to absorb that impact, that intermodal volume we pulled off the trains. And I think we're still in an oversupplied market. So I don't know that it will impact the spot market that much. It may on some lanes, but I suspect the contract market still has capacity to handle the overflow.
Yeah, I would think Seattle, though, like you said prior to, all that freight being pushed over to OTR. And then they have their terminal up there as well. Yeah. So, if that happens on Monday, that's going to be a sticky point right there.
Yeah, so you got the trifecta happening there, right? Yeah. It's not just one level. It's kind of like 3 or 4 different levels.
Right, exactly.
Ryan, what do you think is going to happen to the spot market?
Yeah, I agree with Dean on this one. I don't think it's gonna affect the spot market too much. I know for me, call it a spade, I'm not going to be seeing any of that freight. I'm not going to be even looking to go after that freight just because of the kind of markets that I kind of work on and different things like that. So I'm interested to see what we look at next week if this happens, because we talk about, I've read about Yellow and stuff like that, and I think for everybody who's watching, I'm in the crowd where it doesn't affect me at all. I've never moved anything with Yellow, never will. And even if there's stuff that comes in the capacity from there, it doesn't affect my capacity. Probably not, but it's good to be aware of this, right? I'll share a quick story. We in Canada, as Dan kind of said here, we have our own our own carriers. Like we have like the Day and Rosses, we have the Hundredweight carriers, Maritime Ontario. Those guys will be an extension of YRC or Yellow or something like that. But just know where my advice for sales reps is just understand what you guys are doing. And I love what Dan said about, like LTL, because I know we're in RFP season right now, and we get the truckload, we get the LTL. I always say no to the LTL because I don't really want to do that, but maybe that's a conversation for myself or somebody else who thinks that same way too. Let's reach out to the customer and be like, okay, well, this news is here. You obviously know, I would assume that you're using Yellow. What's going to happen? What are you guys looking at? And start the conversation there. So I think something like this or any kind of news, and to call a spade, I feel like these situations happen like almost every other month. It's insert big company here, close down, it's the same. I don't know. For me, it's like same stuff, just different company, insert different company name every single month. That kind of happens.
Yeah. So with that said as well, I mean, if you look at it analytically, obviously some markets are going to be heavier than others. So when you're a dispatcher and you're dispatching every single day to get your pup out there to go pick up freight, and if you're in that market that's heavy with Yellow freight that is sitting there, you're going to have a disruption. I mean, on truckloads, if you're going cross docks and you're doing line hauls, I would say, yeah, on those truckloads, you might be able to pick them up. But when you're talking about dispatch and daily pickups, you're going to have a disruption there.
Right.
You're definitely going to have a disruption there because now you got all this excess freight. You've got dailies that are picking up. You know what the cube is going to be on these trailers. Now it's going to increase by X-fold. So what we're going to be picked up today might not be picked up for 2 or 3 or maybe 4 days later. Now you're talking about guaranteed shipments. You're looking at a vast amount of different possibilities there. So I think it's going to have an impact on those local markets that are heavy in Yellow freight.
So my thought on it is this. It's, obviously Yellow with their vast network, they consolidate, they move truckload to areas, then they distribute from there, right? Basic hub and spoke kind of thing. If you're a small shipper and you're looking, to go from Miami to Chicago with one skid, your price goes from like a $67 cost to like a $250 cost if you move off of the common carrier. Those price increases are going to, I think, severely impact companies personally, especially after coming off of unprecedented price increases for the last couple of years. Not only that, Yellow will consolidate 10 or 20 different customer shipments and move them. That means 10 or 20 different LTL shipments if they're not going to a Saya or another common carrier in the market. Like in Canada, we don't have very many common carriers. It's just a carrier that does LTL. I'll use Polaris as an example. So Polaris isn't a common carrier. They do 1 to 4 skids. That's their niche, and that's it. And they do it from all over the U.S. to Canada. So if you have, and I'll make the comparison. So, for example, Polaris will be a $250, $300 cost from Jersey to Toronto, whereas Yellow might be $67 or $100. So you're almost, in essence, doubling your cost if you go with a Polaris. If you locked in, 80% tariff discounts with the Yellow or whatever it is. So I think there's that at play, where shippers that only use these services of common carriers are going to be mind boggled at the price of LTL moving forward.
Yeah, get ready for the shock.
Yeah, and I think as a broker, as a salesperson, don't just look at, like what Jeff said, the 1.3 billion pounds of freight or whatever it was that comes into the market, right? There's a whole other aspect to it, is the pricing model that Yellow is using, the tariffs, the FA, the class of freight, all that kind of stuff comes into play. And I don't think all the common carriers in the U.S. are set up in different areas the way, Yellow might be set up in the Pacific Northwest, for example, and Saya is more like, around that Illinois, Ohio, all that area where they're very strong, Jersey, that East Coast. So there's different common carriers have different kind of areas where they're heavy in.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see some kind of ripple, even to the tune of shippers all of a sudden going now, okay, one skid is not my sweet spot. 2, 3, okay, 4 skids based on my units per skid is my cheapest way to ship. So I'm going to call my customers and see if they can wait an extra 2 weeks and ship 4 skids at a time instead of
They
one
can do that.
twice.
Mm-hmm.
I
They
think
can
you're
do
going
that,
to see
but
a
the
lot of
price is
shipping.
still going to go up no matter which way.
Well, it's going to go up.
It's
But
going to go out
what-
astronomically.
Well, the reason I say that, Jeff, is because I worked with a company in California, and what we did is we did an analysis on LTL California to Toronto, and what we found out was 12 skids was the prime spot where per unit it was the cheapest to ship.
Right.
So what we did is we actually spoke to customers, and because we booked 12 skids, we actually got it into town 2 days faster than shipping twice a week. At 6 skids, we shipped every Friday for Monday.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a little bit of adjustment on week 1 for the customers, but after that, their cost per unit went down. So it's kind of like understanding as a salesperson. Now is when we have those conversations with, okay, well, how many units do you typically, and then get that pricing and even present. I mean, hell, if they have to reconfigure their entire shipping pattern because they use yellow, why not reconfigure it to the best possible solution for them? If prices are going to go up, why not do it? And sit down with your shippers right now and have those conversations. Okay, here. You know, how many units? What is your volume customer base? How can we make it the best possible? And I'm not going to say cheapest, but the best possible solution to help you still meet those mandates and KPIs that were set 6 months ago.
For the long run. And then you also have to take into consideration UPS. And when you're doing the optimization of creating those LTL shipments in the morning, the same customer calls you in the afternoon, they have a couple packages. You're using yellow freight, and now you're taking those packages, you're consolidating and optimizing the shipment. Now yellow freight is gone too, you know? So now you're looking at extra boxes that you normally, if you're a heavy hitter, you know, think about e-com and the heavy hitter that they're going to have on UPS if they decide to go, right? I mean, FedEx, are they going to be able to pick up all those things? Then you're going to have all these pissed off union guys that are going to create picket lines in front of these big e-com holding up FedEx ship guys going in there to pick up. You're talking about massive freaking disruptions throughout the country if that happens, you know? So it's a multiple type of things, Dan, that you have to take into consideration, not just the yellow, but the UPS, the strike up in Canada. I mean, things are happening so quick in here that you got to look at.
When it comes to packages, you got DHL, FedEx, you got I think those will be absorbed pretty quickly. Only because I believe that the FedExes of the world, the DHLs of the world, all these different Canpars, all that kind of stuff, all the local area small package guys that Amazon has built up. I think these guys are going to absorb that pretty quick. And the reason I say that is because I think the cost will go up, because if there's a cost difference, like if you look at UPS, Purolator owns the kind of West Coast in Canada. Your best option for delivery and cost per package is Purolator to West Coast Canada, not UPS, not FedEx. So, those Purolators are they all have their areas, right? If you're going into Memphis, then obviously FedEx is your one to choose because they've got one of the biggest hubs in Tennessee, I believe it is. Oh. Yeah. And
but I hope Memphis? They have a contingency plan, though, Dan. I hope they have a contingency plan, FedEx, because they have the same amount of employees, right? They haven't increased them. Now you've got increases of packages. That means there's going to be less manpower to handle more packages. You're going to have disruptions.
Yeah,
you're going to have it.
Yep. But here's the thing: I don't think they won't take it. Right? They won't take the business. They'll just be disruptions. Yep. So it might get picked up on time, but it might be late delivering, or it might be late picked up on time. But it's like it's that whole. It's just we go back to what it looked like during COVID. I remember speaking to Purolator saying, I don't quite get what's happening with my package. It's delayed for so long. And I said, here's the problem. We have twice the trucks pulling in. We have half the people to unload and process. Like, okay, that makes sense. What are you going to do, right? So, Dean, awesome.
Good conversation.
Market, I think, guys. Ryan, take us out of here, brother.
Yeah, let's do that, man. We're back here. Sales Chatter Live every single day at 11 a.m. with the mission of helping 10,000 reps hit a million GP. It's been a great conversation where we have different conversations with people all around the world. Like we're having Dean having here today, having the Donations Cowboy talk to us about everything that's going on in the freight world. So please check us out on YouTube. That's our primary source where we want everybody to take a look at us because we're not a big fan of the LinkedIn algorithm. But with that being said, you can always catch our replay on the amazing audio podcast list. We're on, I believe it's iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we are worldwide. So we are streaming, be able to download this, listen to it, and the most important thing, take action with it. So with that being said, I'll hand it back over to my main man, Dan Deigan.
All right, my friends, we will see you tomorrow. We got some, you know what? I'm not even going to say what we have coming up tomorrow because I think it's just come and watch, pay attention. Dean, Jeff, thank you for being here, my friends. Such a great conversation with you guys all the time. The knowledge and expertise that you guys share is just incredible. Thank you so much.
Gotcha. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Take care.